Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. They did not fear Joan because she carried a sword. They feared her because she refused to break. She was only 19. She could not read. She had no powerful family. Yet kings trembled when she spoke. So they did what powerful systems always do to innocent people they cannot control. They locked her away. They twisted the law. They turned faith into a weapon. And they called it justice. This is not a story about fire. It is a story about how the world slowly decided a young girl must die. Not because she was guilty, but because she was dangerous to lies. Joan of Arc was not born in a palace. She was born in a small village, surrounded by fields, mud, and hard work. Her hands were rough. Her clothes were simple. Her life was quiet. No one looked at her and thought she would shake kingdoms. She was just a peasant girl. But Joan believed something very dangerous. She believed she had a purpose. In a world ruled by powerful men, armies, and church leaders, belief like hers was not welcome. Power did not come from truth, came from control. Joan said she heard voices, not voices of fear, but voices of duty. She said they guided her. She said they pushed her forward when she wanted to hide. And somehow, against all logic, armies listened. Kings listened. That was her crime. On May 23, 1430, Joan was captured. Not by enemies on a battlefield, but by political hands that knew exactly what they were doing. Burgundian forces took her like a prize, not because she mattered as a person, but because she mattered as a symbol. Soon after, they sold her. 10,000 francs. That was the price of her life. The English did not see a girl. They saw a threat. Joan's existence questioned everything they claimed to rule. If she was truly chosen, then their power was a lie. And lies cannot survive truth. So they hid her away in the castle of Beauvais. Stone walls, cold floors, heavy chains, no friends, no family, no comfort. She was not imprisoned like a soldier. She was imprisoned like something dangerous, watched day and night, surrounded by men trained not to listen, but to break people. The clergy came next. They wore robes. They spoke softly. They carried books. But this was not a holy process. It was a performance. The result had already been decided. Their goal was simple: turn Joan from a messenger into a monster, from faith into heresy, from hope into shame. They asked her questions meant to trap her, questions with no safe answers. If she spoke boldly, she was arrogant. If she hesitated, she was lying. Every word was twisted. Still, Joan stood firm. She was young. She was alone. But she was not weak. Even as the walls closed in, she refused to say what they wanted. She spoke with calm honesty, with intelligence that surprised her judges, with courage that made some of them uneasy, because for the first time a few began to see the truth. This was not a trial. It was an execution moving very slowly, and Joan of Arc was standing directly in its path. The trial did not begin with fairness. It began with fear. On January 3, 1431, Joan was officially charged. The room was full of men who already hated what she represented. They sat higher than her. They spoke louder than her. They held books and authority. She stood alone, chained, watched by guards who were not there to protect her. At first, the accusations were endless. 70 charges. 70 ways to destroy a girl who could not even read the words written against her. They said she lied about her visions. They said she dressed wrongly. They said she was proud, rebellious, dangerous. They said she spoke to demons, not to God. But the most important accusation was never written clearly. She made powerful men look weak. Joan listened as they listed her crimes. Her face stayed calm, but her heart beat fast. Every charge was designed to confuse her, to exhaust her, to push her into a mistake. They believed time would break her spirit. But Joan did something they did not expect. She answered carefully. When they tried to trap her with clever questions, she responded with simple truth. When they twisted her words, she corrected them. When they mocked her faith, she did not shout. She did not beg. She stood. Slowly, something strange happened in the room. The charges began to fall apart. Some of the judges noticed it. Joan did not speak like a liar. She did not panic like a fraud. She spoke like someone who believed every word she said. So the system adjusted. They reduced the charges from 70 down to 12. Not because she was innocent, but because they needed the accusations to look reasonable. Even then, the trial remained cruel. Joan was denied legal help. She was denied fair conditions. She was questioned again and again until her voice grew tired. She was threatened with pain, with death, with eternal damnation. Still, she refused to say what they demanded. Behind closed doors, some clergy began to whisper. They questioned the process. They questioned the witnesses. They noticed how testimonies had been forced, rewritten, shaped to fit a story that already had an ending. But doubt was dangerous. Those who questioned the trial risked becoming the next targets. Silence was safer than truth. The English were not interested in justice. They needed Joan destroyed publicly, not killed quietly, destroyed in a way that would erase her meaning. If she was branded a heretic, then everything she stood for would die with her. This was not about faith. This was about power. Joan was 19 years old, surrounded by men twice her age, trained in law, trained in control. The rules were written to crush her. Yet every day she survived the questioning was an insult to the system. And systems do not forgive embarrassment. The trial continued not to discover truth, but to bury it. And Joan, exhausted but unbroken, was walking toward a fate that had already been signed. She just did not know how soon. As the weeks passed, the trial began to change its shape. At first, the judges spoke loudly, confidently. They believed Joan would collapse under pressure. But instead, she endured. She listened. She answered. She refused to give them the confession they needed. And that frightened them, because a system built on lies cannot survive patience. Survives panic, mistakes, and fear. Joan gave them none of these. Some of the clerics watching her began to feel uneasy. They saw how the questions were designed. They noticed how answers were twisted. They heard words added that Joan never spoke. Testimonies appeared that did not match earlier statements. The truth was slipping through the cracks. A few voices dared to say it quietly. This trial is wrong. But power does not respond to truth with humility. It responds with force. The pressure increased. Joan was questioned for hours without rest. She was isolated. Guards stood close, their weapons always visible. She was reminded again and again that disobedience would lead to death, not just in this world, but in the next. They told her that her soul was in danger. They told her that God had abandoned her. They told her that obedience could save her life. This was not law. This was psychological warfare. Still, Joan resisted. She spoke of faith in simple words. She admitted what she did not know. She refused to claim certainty where she had none. That honesty, instead of saving her, was used against her. They labeled her uncertainty as weakness, her courage as pride. Behind the scenes, the English grew impatient. Joan alive was a problem. Joan speaking was a threat. Every day she survived the trial, people outside began to wonder. Rumors spread. Sympathy grew. The image of a calm, faithful girl standing against authority was dangerous. So the goal shifted. They no longer needed the truth. They needed an ending. Witnesses were pushed harder. Some were frightened. Some were promised safety. Some simply repeated what they were told. Words were written and rewritten until they fit the story of a heretic. Even some judges who doubted the trial said nothing. Silence became survival. Joan noticed the change. The room felt colder, the questions sharper. Mercy was no longer offered, only choices that led to the same end. Confess and live in shame. Refuse and die in fire. She was 19. She was tired. She was human. For the first time, fear touched her deeply. Not fear of death, but fear that everything she stood for would be erased. That people would believe the lie that she was evil. Alone in her cell, she prayed, not for escape, but for strength. Not for victory, but for truth to survive her. The system had decided. Truth had become dangerous, and Joan of Arc had become inconvenient. The fire had not yet been lit, but the smoke was already in the air. The moment they truly broke Joan was not with chains or threats of fire. It was with paper. One morning, she was brought into the court again. Her body was weak. Her face was pale. Days of pressure had drained her. Across from her, the judges waited, not with questions, but with certainty. They told her she had one last chance. If she obeyed the church, they said her life would be spared. If she signed a confession, she would be saved from death. If she admitted that her voices were false, the suffering would end. They placed a document before her. Joan could not read. She asked what it said. They explained, quickly, softly, carefully leaving out the truth. They said it was a promise of obedience, nothing more. They said it would protect her. They said it was mercy. But mercy does not come with guards gripping swords. She hesitated. The image of fire haunted her. The smell of smoke. The pain. The fear of dying alone. Screaming. Misunderstood. She was 19 years old. So she did what countless innocent people have done when trapped by power with no escape. She trusted them. Joan placed her mark on the paper. The court reacted with quiet satisfaction. Not relief, not joy, victory, because the document was not mercy. It was surrender. The confession declared her guilty. It admitted lies she never told. It labeled her visions false. It turned her into the very heretic they needed her to be. She was taken back to her cell. But something felt wrong. The guards changed. The conditions worsened. The promises faded. Instead of safety, she faced humiliation. Instead of protection, she faced punishment. She realized too late. She had been tricked. This was the system showing its true face. Once it had her confession, it no longer needed to pretend. She had given them the tool they needed to finish the story. Anger replaced fear. Joan spoke out. She said the confession was false. She said she was deceived. She took back her words, even knowing the cost, even knowing what came next. To the judges, this was perfect. They accused her of relapsing, of returning to heresy after confession. Under their laws, that crime had only one punishment: death. No more delays, no more debate, no more appearances of fairness. The decision was immediate. Joan stood before them once more, smaller, weaker, but clearer than ever. They thought breaking her would silence her. Instead, it exposed them. The sentence was announced. Burning at the stake. Public. Final. Absolute. Joan did not scream. She did not beg. She looked at the men who had destroyed her and saw what they truly were. A system terrified of a girl who refused to lie. The morning of the execution arrived without drama. No bells rang for mercy. No voices rose in protest. The city moved as it always did, while a 19-year-old girl was led toward death. Joan was dressed in simple clothing. Chains rested against her skin. Soldiers walked beside her, not to protect her, but to make sure she did not escape the ending they had prepared. People gathered. Some came out of curiosity. Some came out of fear. Some came because the system told them this was justice, and they believed what they were told. The stake stood in the center, already built, wood stacked carefully, a structure designed not just to kill but to warn. Joan saw it. Her breath caught, but she continued walking. A priest held a cross before her. She fixed her eyes on it, not as a symbol of the church that betrayed her, but as a reminder of something beyond it, something the court could not touch. As they tied her to the stake, her voice finally rose, not in anger, not in hatred, but in faith. She asked for forgiveness, not for herself, but for those who condemned her. Her words unsettled some in the crowd. This was not how monsters behaved. This was not how heretics spoke. Some wept. Some turned away. A few soldiers lowered their eyes, ashamed. But the system does not stop once it begins. Fire was lit. Smoke rose. Heat wrapped around her. Pain came, sharp and final. Her last cries were not curses. They were prayers. And then she was gone. The English believed they had won. They believed destroying her body would destroy her meaning, that by turning her into a criminal, they had erased her power, that fear would replace hope. They were wrong, because something dangerous remained. Witnesses remembered. Doubters spoke quietly. Truth survived in whispers. The execution did not restore order. It exposed corruption. Even some who approved the trial later admitted what it had truly been. A political weapon, a rigged judgment, a killing dressed in law. Years later, the trial would be questioned. Years later, Joan's name would be cleared. But none of that brought her back. None of that erased the suffering. None of that made the fire less cruel. What remains is the lesson. Systems fear innocence more than violence. They fear faith more than rebellion. They fear people who cannot be controlled. Joan of Arc died not because she was guilty, but because she was inconvenient. Her suffering was not an accident. It was a choice made by those in power, and history would never let them forget it. The fire went out. The ashes cooled. The crowd slowly disappeared, but something refused to end. The men who ordered Joan's death returned to their lives. They went back to meetings, prayers, and politics. On the surface, the system continued to function. The machine had done what it was designed to do, remove a threat and move on. Yet beneath that calm, the truth began to rot its foundations. People remembered the way Joan spoke. They remembered her fear, her courage, her final prayers. They remembered how young she was, how alone, how unfair it all felt. Memory became resistance. Years passed. The same institutions that once condemned her quietly reopened her case. Witnesses were called again, this time without chains. Testimonies changed. Lies fell apart. What had been hidden became obvious. The trial had been illegal. The judges had been biased. The accusations had been shaped to serve power. Joan had been innocent. The system admitted it, but only after it was safe to do so. Only after the damage was complete. Only after the girl who challenged them could no longer speak. This is how injustice survives. It apologizes late. Joan's name was restored. Her honor returned. She became a symbol of courage and faith. But that recognition came without warmth, without life, without the years stolen from her. She never grew older, never walked freely again, never saw the truth reach the world. What remains is not just her story, but the pattern. Poor girl, powerful system, a trial designed to fail her, a punishment meant to scare others into silence. History repeats this shape again and again. Joan was not the first, and she would not be the last. The names change, the methods change, but the cruelty stays familiar. Her story forces an uncomfortable question. How many innocent people were destroyed not because they were wrong, but because they were inconvenient? How many systems call themselves just while feeding on fear? Joan's strength was never in her sword. It was in her refusal to lie, even when lying could have saved her life. They burned her body. They buried the truth. They expected silence. Instead, they created a reminder that no fire can erase. Because power may win the moment, but it cannot burn meaning. And sometimes, the quiet courage of one young girl is enough to haunt empires forever.